I remember this one time I was all alone at home, just like any other weekend. See, I'm not much of a social butterfly, so most weekends it's just me, a couple of video games, and a heap of takeout. Nothing exciting, just the usual. This particular weekend, though, it was different somehow. It didn't start off that way. It was pretty much the same old routine, but come nightfall, things started to feel a bit off. That night, as I was curled up on the couch, controller in hand, I started hearing these noises, you know? The kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Yeah, those. It was like a whisper, a faint rustling sound that seemed to be coming from nowhere in particular. I paused my game, sitting there in the eerie silence, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to hear. The noises continued, soft but persistent, like the house was trying to tell me something. It wasn't like the usual creaks and groans old houses make. This was different. It was almost rhythmic, like a slow, steady heartbeat. I tried telling myself it was nothing, just the house settling in for the night, or maybe the wind playing tricks. But deep down, I knew it was something more. I couldn't shake off this uneasy feeling, this sense of dread that had wrapped itself around me. I tried to drown out the sounds, to focus on my game, but they were there, at the edge of my hearing, a constant reminder of the unsettling night that was unfolding. I tried to laugh it off, to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. After all, it was just a few strange noises, right? Nothing to be scared of. But still, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched, like there was something unseen lurking in the shadows. I shrugged it off as the house settling, but little did I know it was just the beginning. The noises grew louder, and I started to feel a chill run down my spine. There was no wind, no drafts in the house, yet I could swear I felt a cold breath on the nape of my neck. It was a weird sensation, like 1,000 icy needles pricking my skin. The house was old, full of creaks and groans, but these sounds were different. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Soft whispers floated through the air, so faint that I questioned if they were real or just the product of my overactive imagination. Every tick of the clock echoed like a drumbeat in my head, making the silence that followed even more unbearable. The quiet was deafening, and in that silence the whispers grew louder. They were unintelligible, a jumble of hushed tones that made my ears strain to catch every syllable. The cold was now a constant companion, wrapping around me like a shroud. It seemed to seep into my bones, making me shiver uncontrollably. A feeling of dread washed over me, a sense of impending doom that I couldn't shake off. I felt eyes on me, an unseen presence that seemed to hover just out of sight. It was like being watched by a predator. The hairs on the back of my neck standing up in response. I could almost feel its gaze, a heavy weight that made my skin crawl. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that filled the room. They seemed to close in on me, wrapping around me like the cold. I felt trapped, cornered by the unseen presence and the bone-chilling cold. Fear clawed at my gut, a primal instinct warning me of danger. I wanted to run, to escape, but my feet were rooted to the spot. I was a deer caught in headlights, paralyzed by the terror that gripped me. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, but deep down I knew something was wrong. Then something happened that I will never forget. It was a regular Tuesday night, or so I thought. I was sitting on my worn-out couch, flipping through a book, trying to distract myself from the eerie silence that seemed to have swallowed my house. Suddenly a chill ran down my spine, like ice water being dripped slowly down my back. I brushed it off as a draft, but that's when I noticed it. The oddity in my living room. My coffee mug, which I'd placed on the table just a moment ago, started to slide across the surface on its own, as if being pulled by an invisible string. My heart pounded in my chest, my palms began to sweat. I tried convincing myself it was just my imagination, but then a door I knew I'd closed slammed shut with a bang that echoed in the silence. The sound was so sudden, so loud, it felt like a punch to the gut. I jumped up, my book falling to the floor, forgotten. As I stood there, in the middle of my living room, I felt a cold gust of wind wrap around me, despite all the windows being shut. The room temperature dropped so drastically that I could see my breath in the dim light. And then the whispers started. Soft at first, like a gentle breeze rustling through leaves. But they grew louder, more insistent, echoing in my ears, though I couldn't make out the words. It felt like 1,000 voices were whispering all at once, all around me. The sound was deafening, the sensation overwhelming. I covered my ears, but the whispers didn't stop. They seemed to be coming from inside my head. The fear, the terror, gripped me like a vice. I wanted to run, to escape, but my legs wouldn't obey. I was rooted to the spot, my heart hammering in my chest like a wild drum. The whispers grew louder, the room colder, the fear more intense. I was frozen with fear, unsure of what to do next. The rest of the night was a blur filled with fear and uncertainty. I remember the clock striking midnight, the chimes echoing through the silence of the house. Each tick of the clock seemed to amplify the terror that had seeped into the very walls of my home. The cold gusts of wind howling outside were no match for the chill I felt inside. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest, keeping a rhythm of pure dread. The lights, they flickered as if some unseen force was playing with the switches. And the shadows, oh, the shadows seemed to dance with a life of their own. In the quiet of the night, I could hear it, a faint whisper, like someone calling from a distance. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it was there, a soft murmur that made my skin crawl. The whisper turned into a low growl, then a wailing that echoed through the hollows of my house. I felt a cold hand brush against my arm, but when I turned, there was nothing there. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the curtains, it all seemed amplified, a symphony of horror that played on loop. I could feel eyes on me, watching me, following my every move. The feeling of being watched was so intense it felt like 1,000 needles piercing my skin. I was frozen in my spot, too terrified to move, too terrified to breathe. I felt trapped, like a mouse cornered by a cat, waiting for the inevitable. The fear was so palpable I could taste it, bitter and metallic on my tongue. Through the long hours of the night, I sat there in the oppressive darkness, waiting for dawn to break. Each minute felt like an eternity, each second a lifetime. I was a prisoner in my own home, a captive of my own fear. I couldn't wait for the night to be over. The sun couldn't rise fast enough. I just wanted the safety of daylight, the promise of a new day. But until then, I was stuck in the longest, most terrifying night of my life. As dawn broke, the strange occurrences seemed to stop. The eerie silence that filled the air was an odd comfort after a night of unimaginable terror. The stillness of the morning was a stark contrast to the chilling events that had unfolded just hours before. Suddenly the ordinary seemed extraordinary, the chirping of the birds, the rustling of the leaves, the soft glow of the rising sun. They all felt like a balm to my frayed nerves. It was as if nature was trying to soothe my rattled senses, reminding me of the beauty and normalcy of life outside my haunted experience. The relief, however, was bittersweet. The fear hadn't completely subsided. It lurked in the corners of my mind, making me flinch at the slightest noise, making me look over my shoulder more than once. The memory of that nightmarish encounter was etched in my mind, playing over and over like a horror movie that refused to end. I felt a sense of disbelief. Could it have been a dream, a figment of my overly active imagination? But no. The chilling reality was too visceral to be a mere illusion. The fear was real, the terror was real, and the experience was all too real. As the day wore on, I found myself constantly on edge, jumping at shadows and flinching at sudden movements. I was a prisoner in my own home, trapped by the fear of the unknown. The once familiar surroundings now seemed strange and threatening, each corner hiding potential horror. In the days that followed, I tried to make sense of what had happened. I questioned my sanity, my reality, and everything I thought I knew about the world. My nights were filled with dread, my days consumed by fear. I was a changed man, forever marked by the eerie events of that unforgettable night. Reflecting on it now, I realize that the experience has left an indelible mark on me. It has made me aware of the unknown, the unexplainable, and the unfathomable. It was an experience that changed my perspective forever, a chilling reminder that there are things in this world beyond our understanding.